All
Well,
set. Ready?
welcome everybody. It's so nice to see the faces and thank you for joining us tonight to spend some time with Kat Williams and to discuss her book on the Trailblazer Maybelle Blair. Just really a character and very interesting. I see we have Dixie and Michael Marsh from Chicago. We've got a lot of familiar faces and new ones. Welcome everyone. So this is a joint chapter meeting with the Wisconsin Keltner chapter, the
Mhm.
Minnesota Halsey Hall, Chicago Emil Rothe, and the Central Illinois. So welcome everyone, and for anyone who's outside of our chapters. I'll introduce just very briefly Kat. She was a professor at Marshall in West Virginia and was a longtime member of, and you were president of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League at one time, right? Yeah.
Right, the Players
The
Association. Yeah,
Players Association, right? Yeah.
right.
And also now she is the CEO of the International Women's Baseball Center, which I write about a lot in our newsletter. Some of you may be familiar with it, but we'd like to hear a little bit about the museum and center at
Yeah,
the end after we talk about Mabel.
of
Um,
course.
so I just have a very rudimentary slideshow. I took a couple of photos from your book. I didn't have any good pictures of Mabel. I tried to find a couple, but anyway, I'll try to share
Yeah.
my screen. Um, and we'll see if this works. Otherwise, you can just talk about Mabel. Let's see. I don't do this very often, so if it doesn't work, and I have to say, I have a new laptop. So I'm trying to go into Keynote. But anyway, we can just start talking about the book and I'll see if I can get some photos because it might be nice to just talk over the photos. So you've known Mabel for a long time. So how did this
Yeah,
book come
we
about?
met in 2003.
Yeah,
Yep.
with the Players Association, I assume.
Right, right. Yeah, I was doing I was a fairly, well, I'll say much younger professor at Marshall then, and was doing some research. And went to the Cooperstown to the Hall of Fame to do research, and was met Tim Wiles, who was, of course, the
Oh,
the
absolutely.
archivist there. Yeah. And he was telling me about the Players Association. He said, if you become a member, you can go to their reunions. And so I was pretty stunned. So I did. And so in 2003, September of 2003, I went to Syracuse, New York for what happened to be their 60th reunion, and was terrified when I walked into the lobby of that hotel, and there were all those former ball players, and of course, they were full of life and talking and telling stories. And so that's when I was first connected to these women in person. I had done a fair amount of research, and I was starting my first book, which came out in 2017.
So how did you get the idea of writing for, because I know you wrote on Woman After the League and what they did, which and
Right.
also and also Lefty Alvarez.
Lefty Alvarez.
Mhm.
That first book, I was intrigued. There are a number of books about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And of course, the movie A League of Their Own. And people think they know a fair amount about the league. And I kept thinking, there's got to be more. You got to dig a little deeper. And we don't need another book that just tells that story. But the thing
Mhm.
that intrigued me from the beginning was, what did playing in that league actually mean to those women? Um, how did it affect their lives? And so my first book is about that. There are a number of ways that having access to professional baseball affected their lives, not the least of which is that in many cases they made double what their fathers made. And they made a lot of money. They sent it back home. They sent their siblings to college. They went to college. They became doctors and lawyers and airplane pilots. And Maybelle became one of the first female directors of a unit at Northrop Aircraft. I mean, there were real consequences to having that opportunity. And aside from money, it was they traveled in 1947. They went to Havana, Cuba for spring training. And many of these young women were, they came from, small towns and farms,
Mhm.
and, they would never have had those opportunities. So that was my first interest. And so it was from that research that I met Maybelle. I met Isabel Lefty Alvarez, who was from Cuba and the subject of my second book. And it took me a long time. I always thought that there should be a book about Maybelle. And um, I kind of mentioned it to her, and she, oh, no, 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 there, you don't want to write a book about me. I'm not a star. Maybelle only played 1 year in the All-American League. And I'm not a star. I wasn't a great pitcher. And I said, well, if that's all you did, you went, you played 1 year, yeah, okay, maybe we don't write a book about you. But by the time I brought this up to her, I knew some of her background. I knew that at as early as age like 4 or 5, her brother, she and her family were building a baseball diamond across the street. Now, this was during the Depression. And so there was an empty field across from where they lived, so they created a baseball diamond. Her brother hooked up an old gate to the back of a tractor and put Maybelle on the gate as a weight and to use to drag the infield of this. And she was quite literally part of baseball from the beginning. And so from that moment to today, she is quite literally today on her way to Trailblazers, to see and meet and participate in an event for girls to get more young women on the baseball diamond. That's the story. The baseball is the thread that runs through her entire life. Um, and so I finally convinced her that uh, she was indeed worthy. She kept saying I'm not a star, I'm not a star, and she was a star and still is a star to me. And I know that her story is so important to young women. I mean girls know her story, know who she is, know that league. And she is indeed a trailblazer. And I think that is something that needed to be told.
Yeah, it's almost like she has more notoriety now
Yeah.
than ever. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
so for girls and women who play, they know
Yeah.
her. She is absolutely beloved. So there are all these different chapters to her life
Yeah.
and that are all fascinating. And you did a
Right.
great job of stringing them together. And but now she's yeah, she's somewhat has she's somewhat of a celebrity in women's
She
baseball at
is.
least.
She absolutely is. And for those of you who have not yet read the book, there's a quote that was so important in my own life. As a young person, I had an undiagnosed learning disability. And
Mhm.
back in those days, they didn't test for those things or recognize those things in the same way that they do now, fortunately. And so what they did when I was in the seventh grade, they just stuck me in a room in this remedial reading class, and there were these small little biographies of various people. And so they said, here, pick one. And so I picked a biography of Amelia Earhart. And there was a quote, and I'm going to butcher it. And I use it in the book, but basically it says, if some people are born with runways already built for them, and if you have one, take off. if you don't, get a shovel and dig one and do it for yourself and the people coming behind you. And that
Mhm.
has been an important quote to me. And one afternoon, I was sitting in on the couch in Maybelle's house, and we were talking about her life, and that quote popped into my head, and I said, "Oh my God, that's exactly what you've been doing. You've been digging runways for 90 years." And so, if you think about it in that way, what she's done both for girls and women in baseball, but then even beyond that. It's truly remarkable, and it's an important story to tell.
Well, yeah, you're exactly, I love that quote, and you're right. It totally applies to her because she was constantly organizing softball and baseball teams, what, from middle school and beyond, and in her workplace at Northrop, and just amazing. Can you see my screen, by the way?
I can.
The Okay,
Yep.
so I've got just a few photos here. So
Yeah.
not a good resolution for this one, but I just thought it was cute.
I
She's
have
got
to
her new
tell you a
tennis
story
racket.
about I have to tell you a story about this photograph. So
Okay.
she loved baseball. Her brother who was a couple of years older, was a really good baseball player. And she followed him everywhere. And he's the one who taught her how to keep score. And while he was across the street playing baseball with his friends, he would put her in front of the radio and she would keep score and then come out and tell them what the score was. But she desperately wanted to play baseball. And her mother and father loved baseball, all of them. They all played, they
Mhm.
were fine with her playing. But she got so upset because she couldn't play with him. And so they gave her mother bought a tennis racket and said, "Here, why don't you go play tennis and let's find out about the women who play tennis." So this is a picture of her with her tennis racket. And she tells the story about, I didn't know what to do with that tennis racket. I swung it like a baseball bat. And, so even in this moment, she's, "Thanks, Mom. I'm happy to have this tennis racket, but how does this get me onto a ball diamond?"
Exactly. Oh my gosh. No, again, this is from your book.
Yep.
So is this with the
Yep.
Cardinals, the
Yeah,
Chicago?
that's the
So
Chicago
she was a
Cardinals.
solid softball player. I mean, that's the thing. Only
Oh,
1 year
she
in
was
the
a
AAGPBL,
very,
but
yeah, she was a very good softball player. She played professionally longer than she played professional baseball. But then again, most of the players from the All-Americans were softball players. And in fact, many of them are probably in that picture. They moved from a lot of the softball teams to the All-Americans, and then many of them went back to softball when the All-Americans started lengthening the base paths and the pitching distance and all of that. They moved back to softball. But yeah, her first time away from home was Chicago. And so and it was while playing for the Cardinals that she was recruited, but for the All-American League.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. A lot of these women played, she was typical. It's like they played
Yeah,
baseball with their brothers or kids in the neighborhood, and then they were
right.
forced into softball, kind
Yeah,
of. And
yeah,
then,
yeah,
but yeah, that national, so a little bit about the National Girls Baseball League. It was softball, not baseball, and it wasn't really national. It was in
right.
Chicago, but it was a pro
Yep.
league. It was a
It was a
solid,
pro league. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And they were very, very good. Very good.
yeah. And she's primarily a pitcher and I think you do a good job of explaining it in the book. Just, she was a solid pitcher, but did she have a leg injury? She couldn't really
She
run that
did
well.
well. She injured her legs, and it was more. It wasn't like a break or anything like that. She just had some real issues with her legs in general. And back then, there wasn't that swoop in with the physical therapist, and so she would cramp up a lot, and she would get. I mean, she just really had some difficult times with them. So when she went back to California after that 48 season, She just realized that she would, she needed to find a job and support herself, and she continued to play softball though. So
Yeah, I know. I think she played. What age did she stop actually playing? Because she just really kept playing through
yeah, she kept playing for
work.
several years. She did have a back injury. She was thrown from a horse.
Oh,
And so that was I can't remember off the top of my head how old she was, but that would have been, maybe 40s, 30s, 40s, something like that. So even at that age, and those of us who are old softball players, we keep trying, right? We keep trying in this senior league and that senior, but yeah, she eventually was more into helping to create, like she created the leagues or the teams at Northrop where she worked and other places where she worked. She helped create the teams and coach the teams. And so she was very much involved, but really stopped playing. I want to say in her probably early 30s.
wow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've jumped ahead here. So if you'd like
Yeah.
to mention anything else about her work life or you know,
Well, just that,
obviously the book didn't jump from childhood to this age. So
right. Well, the thing is, when she came back that year after playing, she first went to school to become a physical therapy assistant. And she did that for a little while, but that just wasn't her. She just really didn't enjoy it. Her brother had worked at Northrop Aircraft for many years and had worked there during World War II. And so he helped get her a job. She basically started as a gopher. She was,
mhm.
messenger, eventually became a chauffeur. And the whole time she's coaching men's softball, men's baseball. She's creating women's softball teams there. And eventually, she was promoted to director of transportation for Northrop Aircraft. And she said, sure, I'll do it, but on one condition, and that is that you teach me how to drive every single vehicle, everything, forklift, 18-wheeler, everything. And she did. She learned to drive every single one of them. And so that's where when she retired from that job and from that position. She loved it. She loved working there, and is very proud of her time working at Northrop. And so that was in the 80s. And right after that, the All-Americans started to get back together, kind of started to find one another and created, over a period of a few years, created the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League Players Association. And by mid 1980s, that's starting to go. So the timing of that was really good. And so she was able to reconnect with a lot of those women. Um, Many of whom she remained friends with. They lived in the California area. They had been friends for even before the league. So what you see here is a picture of the very first trip. That's Maybelle on the right, and that's our beloved other founder, Shirley Berkovich, who passed away 3 years ago. This is their first trip back to Bayer Stadium. And this was in 2015. And the IWBC, the International Women's Baseball Center, was a new nonprofit at that point. And some folks there in Rockford offered to donate some property to us that was right across the street from Bayer Stadium where the Peaches played. And so it was a cold November day. And those two California girls were freezing to death, I will tell you that. But Shirley was a Rockford Peach. And this was her first time back to Bayer Stadium since she played. And so that's what that picture is. And it makes me smile because at one point, we were all walking around and looking around. And at one point, we kind of we missed Shirley. We didn't know where she was. And we looked over and she was standing at home plate, looking out across through center field. And she was just standing there. And so after a few minutes, we went over to her and she said, I just never thought I would see this again. And so it's a really special memory for me. So yeah, this is when the IWBC first went to Rockford, and it's now our headquarters.
Yeah, and I always recommend a trip to
Yeah,
Buyer Stadium in
right,
Rockford. Just
right.
fantastic. And then of course I mean, this is her bread and butter, just her advocacy of girls, especially
Yep,
in baseball and
yep,
women, and how she
right.
gets along with them. So I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah, this was a tournament from Baseball for All, Justine Siegel's organization. And the first game, Shirley was coaching one team and Maybelle was coaching the other. And I took this picture because, as you can see, Maybelle's kind of leaning over, talking to them. These girls are mesmerized, first of all. And she said, "Now we're going to win, aren't we? Aren't we going to win? We're going to win." And you can just see her. And those girls were like, "Yeah, right, sure, okay." And I don't know how old these girls are. I want to say maybe what, 9 or 10, something like
Nine,
that.
yeah.
And they were like, I don't know what she's talking about, but we're all in. And she was coaching them like they were 20-year-olds about to go to the major leagues. But it is her bread and butter. It is what keeps her going, and that's what she's doing this weekend in Florida.
Yeah, it's great she doesn't treat them like they're 9-year olds,
Oh no,
Yeah,
she
she
talks
treats
to
them like
them
ball
about,
players.
yeah, she talks to them like they're ball players. That's right. Yeah.
So I was at one of the baseball for all. I don't have a lot of good photos, but I found this one. Not a good
Yeah.
photo because they're not look, but there's Mabel on the right, Shirley,
Yep.
Joyce Hill Westerman. I had driven her from
Right. Right.
Kenosha, and Janine Lesko.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And beside Maybelle is Ann Giamato,
Oh
who
yeah,
is still in Rockford and played for Rockford. Um, yeah, that's one of the dugouts at Bayer.
right. Yeah, yeah. They
Yeah.
did a fantastic job. I wish I had more photos. I just never
Yeah.
took that
Yeah.
many. And here's Mabel, and I like this because she has. I mean, that's kind of her signature is the cane bat.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
yeah.
She has a number of those, and it's funny. She gets them signed, and then when it's full, she puts them up, and then we get her another one. Um, you would not believe some of the people that are on those bats. I mean, Kamala Harris.
Oh
Um,
wow.
there,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, Sandy Koufax. I mean, there are
Wow.
amazing number of, all the stars from the movie, stars from the Amazon TV show. There's a bat with, I mean, they're priceless. Um, and every time she flies, gets on a plane, they want to try to take it away from her because
Oh
here she
no.
is toting this baseball bat, right? You cannot get on a plane with a baseball bat. And every single time she talks him out of it. And there have been a number of times when the pilot has agreed to keep it in the cockpit with him or her until the flight is over and then they give it back to her. And, I keep thinking to myself, one of these days somebody's going to be stubborn and determined and she's just going to haul off and use that thing. But, she is absolutely a treasure.
Oh, she's a special one for sure. Yeah, yeah. So I think that's all I have. Yeah, I'll close
Was
this up.
she uh you know one of the things that you might want to take me off the center there, I think, Alf, if you stop sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's okay. It makes me look like a robot.
Okay. How do I unshare?
That I'm not sure.
Return to defaults? No. Sorry about that.
That's
There's a
okay.
red button right there that says stop
Stop
sharing.
share.
Oh yeah,
right in
stop
the center.
share. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank
Is that
you.
better? Sorry about
It was
that.
making me look kind of, like, I don't know, something weird going on. Um, so, hey, Bill, it's good to see your face there, Mr. Perch. Um, so, and I know you probably have questions and a plan, but the one thing that I always want to say when I'm talking about this book is that Maybelle always said, "Oh, as I told you, you don't want to write a biography of me because, as you all know, you've probably read a million different baseball biographies, and they're almost always the superstar, right? Or the person with the highest batting average, or the person with the I don't know, won the most games or played the most games or whatever. It's a superstar because baseball fans, we love statistics, right? I mean, we love to know the batting average and the ERA and all that stuff. But this is not that. And I think it's important, a lot of biographies are not that. In my opinion, not enough of them, but those are important. But what's also important is the characters in the game. And by that, I mean a lot of baseball players that we talk about their stats are certainly characters. But people like Maybelle, male or female, people like Maybelle for whom the game was this lifeline, was this thread that ran through their lives and then into their work and their goals, their dreams. It's so important that those stories are told too, and specifically when they are stories about women. We talk a lot about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and that's important. But as I am fond of saying, if we drew this big timeline of the history of girls and women in baseball, the AAGPBL would be this tiny little tick on that long timeline. We did not start playing baseball in 1943, and we did not stop in 1954. Women have always been part of this game. We've always played, we've always coached, we've always umpired and tended the fields and kept the stats and every piece of it. And so the International Women's Baseball Center, our primary goal is to preserve and protect the history and the legacy of girls and women in all aspects of the game internationally. And so that's where Maybelle is positioned, right? She is positioned in that big story. Yet she only played 1 year in one league. And it's important for us to understand the significance of her history because that history and what she has created for those young girls that you saw her with in the picture, she's created the foundation for them. And now we have a new women's professional baseball league starting next year. It is important that people like her um, get a chance to have their stories told because their role in creating opportunity and access is crucial. And that's true for boys too, right? I mean, it's not just for young women, but it is especially true for girls and women in this story. So this is not a typical sports biography. But it is a story about someone for whom baseball, sports, and specifically baseball changed their life. And then she turned around and changed the lives of the girls coming behind her. And to me, that is an extremely important story and one that is worth telling.
I agree. Her timeline is just, I mean, she played baseball with her family on
Yep.
sandlots, you know,
Yep.
well before the AAG, PBL. You're right. That's
Yep.
just a blip. And
Yep.
you know, women were playing, and then her connection through, you know, creating all these teams, and then her
Yep.
connection with Penny Marshall and creating a
Yeah.
League of Their Own movie. And
Yeah.
then it's just fascinating, her connection with the producers and actors in the League of Their Own TV series, which I highly
Yeah.
recommend if people haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
really cool. And
And that was such an important thing. You know, she was somewhat of an advisor to the movie, the 1992 movie made by Penny Marshall. She did not have a huge role in that. I don't want to overstate it. But she became friends with Penny, and she became friends with Penny's daughter, Tracy Reiner, and Megan Cavanaugh, who played Marla Hooch, and, you know, a lot of those actors. And she was in that last scene where the old ball players come back to Cooperstown. And then you fast forward, you know, to, you know, what, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and Will Graham and Abby Jacobson, Darcy Carden, and many others, obviously, decided they wanted to do an Amazon TV series. It was never meant to be a remake of the movie. It was never meant to be that, and it wasn't that. In 1992, Penny Marshall could not talk about race and sexuality. She just simply would not have been able to do that. But when Will and Abby wanted to do this Amazon show, they went and talked to Penny. She was not long before she passed away. And she gave her blessing for them to do this because it was basically taking a deeper dive. It was about the Peaches. It was about that league, but it was looking at the other pieces and parts, and that is sexuality and the issue of racism. Women of color did not play, were not allowed to play in the All-American League. They just simply were not given that opportunity. Even the Cuban women who played, presented as white. So, you know, those were things that we just would not have seen from Penny. But the Amazon series, and if you haven't seen it, please go see it. Get it. It's I don't remember how many episodes. It was not renewed for a second season, but it is a lot of Maybelle's story in there, and you will see some of that in this book too. She was a very important uh, advocate for and also advisor for that TV show. And there is uh, probably one of the best hours of television I've ever seen was episode 6, where there was a bar raid. And if you watch that and you don't get a lump in your throat, then you're not paying attention. And that was a Maybelle Blair true story. And so it was very well done, but of course there's always going to be backlash when there is a beloved movie or something that you know someone does something with. But it also gave Maybelle a whole new level of stardom. The TV show was invited to premiere at Tribeca that year, and they did. And Maybelle was there, and they had showed the first episode, and then they had a panel, and Maybelle was on the panel. Will and Abby and some of the others were openly um, gay, and so Blair was sitting up there, had had these open conversations with them for the first time in 90 years, had the open conversations, and she was sitting up there on the stage, and she came out. At age 95, she came out and the place erupted. There was a standing ovation and applause, and she was blown away. Will was crying, everyone was crying. And it took 95 years for her to be able to do that. But bam, when she did it, she kicked the doors off. Um, and so she became a role model for a whole other group of people, and still is. And not too long after that, she was in an airport, and this young man, young gay man, he identified himself that way, came up to her and said, "I saw what you did, and I want you to know it means the world to me, that you did that." And so the impact this woman has, it is baseball it is somewhat about baseball, but it is also that baseball is the vehicle, right? It's the way that she can get her story and other stories out there. So if you have not seen the Amazon series, please watch it. It's quite wonderful, and I um, I was very disappointed not to see a second season. So
I agree. Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic show. I think
yeah.
Amy said it was 8 episodes.
Yes, I saw that. Thank
Yeah.
you, Amy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't enough. However many it wasn't enough. So, and I can talk all night about this, and God knows I would if you let me, but I also want to make sure you guys have chance. I mean, Mary, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I want to make sure people have a chance to ask questions, and so
Good
whatever
timing.
you
I was going to
want.
go to questions. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good.
I'm going to go one. You can put questions in the chat, or we have 21 people. We can raise our hands. But I'll give you Dixie's question. Am I correct in thinking that Madonna played her character um,
Well, no, not really.
in the movie
No,
All the Way May?
no. And that is why, if you notice, this book is called All the Way, not All the Way May. She was not All the Way May in the movie. That was a nickname given to her after the fact because she was so flashy like Madonna. That was a made-up character. All of the characters are composites of a bunch of players. There was no Dottie. There was no
Mhm.
Kit. There was no Madonna's character. But after the movie came out, and I mean, because Maybelle has been, sunglasses wearing, long painted fingernail, flashy, she's always been that way. And so it kind of came about as a kind of a joke later. And I was very careful not to use that. And Maybelle is actually very careful. She tells people not to introduce her that way because she's so careful not to misrepresent. So the publisher wanted me to use All the Way May, and I just wouldn't do it. So this was All the Way is both that and also kind of a story of her life, right?
No, from being involved with the All Americans, it was always contentious that some woman would say, "Oh, I was Dottie,"
Yep.
and you're
Oh
right.
yeah.
That movie was such a composite of things.
Yeah, I still get that when I'm in Rockford. Oh, my great grandmother was Dottie. I was she was the catcher, and I'm always polite about it, obviously. I mean, they love that about their family member, but that isn't true.
Right.
So, yep.
We've got a question from Mary Luthner. I sometimes go to Rockford for work. Can you tell me a little bit about Buyer Stadium? Is it
Yep.
open to the public? Do they have games there? Any museums? So you can go with that.
Well, yes, Buyer is open to the public. We are in the process of renovating. And I mean, it is not a stadium like with big, we don't have like big stadium seating and stuff like that. It's an old stadium. It was originally a WPA built. And the original ticket booth is still there. It is protected It is historically protected. We're actually working to get it on the National Register of Historic Places. You can come anytime, see the ticket booth, walk out onto the field. There aren't a lot of games being played there right now because we are in the middle of, we just built an outfield fence. We're in the middle of fundraising for a press box and lights and just a lot of the upgrades. You want to try to keep you want to try to keep the essence of the old field, the old stadium, but you can't play modern games without some of the modern stuff. And so that's where we are. We do a lot of workshops, we do a lot of community baseball, that kind of stuff. But be on the lookout. And there will be a lot more coming to Buyer, I think.
Yeah, we're looking forward to exciting events ahead, and I
Yep.
heard you got bathrooms, and so
Hey,
that's
I never
super
in my
great.
life thought I'd be so damned excited about bathrooms, but I have spent 2 years now getting those things built. So it's it is a glorious job I have.
And I also want to tell people, if you just want to go to Buyer and spend time there, there's like an outdoor museum that you can peruse.
Well,
And
that is one of the things that we will be redoing, upgrading.
sure.
It is quite old, and faded. Unfortunately, all this stuff takes a lot of money, and
Yep.
so we are fundraising for it. But and there's just something about being on Buyer Stadium. I mean, it's I if you're a baseball fan, you talk about the Field of Dreams. That's a Field of Dreams right there.
And there aren't many places you can go to where the woman played, and
No,
it's still
no.
we're lucky to have Simmons Field in Wisconsin, so where the Kenosha
Hmm.
Kingfish play.
Right,
That was where the Kenosha Comets played. That was their second home. The first home was
right,
Lakefront Stadium, and then
right.
Horlick Field. I think they
Hmm.
have an artificial turf football
Yep,
field, but you can still go to Horlick Field. It still has the stone facade. So, but Buyer
right.
Stadium is precious in that way. So,
Yeah, yeah, it
I don't know.
is.
Have you
We're
ever been to?
very,
Do they still have the Stadium Lounge near there? Because I was told that some of the women used to hang out there.
yeah, no, it's
It's kind of
closed.
closed. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is,
Just
the
wondering.
building is still there, but it is closed. And I have hung out there myself a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I remember being with the players and going for a beer and a burger.
yep, yep,
It was close. So
yep, yep.
let's see. Amy asked, let me see here. How hard was it to fit her story into just 192 pages? Or do you have favorites?
Well, the thing is, it was hard because again, some of you were not on. We were Karen and I were kind of chatting about the difficulty of. I'm an academic by trade. I'm a history professor, and so for me, when you write something like this, you have all these long bibliography and 100 page of footnotes and there's all this historical context and stuff like that and it took me a long time to write this book because that's not what the publisher wanted. So I could sit down and tell the story, and then I'd put in all this stuff, and then I'd talk about the Cold War, and I'd talk about World War II, and I'd talk about the Great Depression, and they're like, "Cat, this is great, but this is not what we want." So it was difficult in that way for me. And it could have been twice this long, even with just her stories in it. But it again it was intentional that it is accessible in this way, and she had a say in that as well. And so I really wanted. I told her when we agreed to do this, they only had one requirement, and that is that she was always honest with me, and that I would write. I mean, I wasn't going to write anything that was going to be embarrassing or anything, but I was going to write the story, and she had to let me do that. So it was this combination of me sort of fighting my insides about how to do this, and then, just kind of streamline, tell those stories. It's Maybelle's voice. So.
And someone asked about donations.
Ah,
Dixie.
glad you asked. You can go to iwbc.org and you can read about the organization. Maybelle is a founder. Shirley Berkovich was a founder. I was a founder of the IWBC. And until 2 years ago, when I retired from Marshall and was hired by the IWBC, until then, not one person got paid. We were an all volunteer nonprofit, and we have come a long way from uh, February 21st or 22nd, 2014, when about 6 or 7 of us threw in $20 to an internationally recognized nonprofit. And so I'm very proud of that growth. But in order to do the work, in order to build that building and to renovate Bayer, it is a multi-million-dollar project. And so IWBC.org, and there's a great big yellow donate button. So just punch that several times, and we would appreciate it. You can also become a member of the IWBC, and all of that is on our website.
And it's just a great community of people. So would you mind talking about the women's conference that you do with SABR?
Yeah, we do the IWBC co-sponsors with SABR, Women in Baseball Conference. It is the only conference of its kind. And we started, this is, oh gosh, Mary, is this our 7th year? Um,
Hmm.
I, 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 I think that's right.
You did a couple of in-persons
We
that
did
I
one
wasn't
in,
a part of.
the
Yeah.
first one was in person. But after that, of course, we were hit by COVID, and, and so we ended up having all these people from several countries because it was virtual. And so we thought, hey, we're gonna keep it virtual. So now we do a virtual conference. Call for papers will be going out. It is the 3rd week of September. And registration is generally through SABR. And even though we have a theme every year, we really love having any kind of paper, presentation, whether it's art or music, anything that is connected to women in baseball. And so we have had just some amazing conferences. And it's a really important partnership between SABR and the IWBC. And when, every year it grows, and we've had people from Australia and Japan and Taiwan, and it just is it is the only one. And so we're trying to grow it and make it even bigger than it is, but it's quite wonderful. And it's also okay to, if you don't know a lot about women's baseball, um you know register, spend $50 or whatever it is, and register and come and listen, because there are some really amazing presentations. So
It's a fun weekend. Yeah.
yeah,
Amy put in the chat that it's September 19th through 21st.
that's
So
right. That's right.
yeah, you can
Thank you,
register
Amy.
through SABR.
Yep, yep,
You
right.
go to the
Yes.
SABR events
It'll,
page, and it's
yeah, it'll be on both the IWBC and the SABR websites. But the actual registration is through SABR.
Yeah, and I recommend everyone go to the IWBC website. Lots of fun stuff. And yeah, they had a Meet Our Members. Amy Cuevas was the subject of the last one. So very
Yep.
nice. Yeah, yeah. Nice to get to know you, Amy. Yeah. So any questions?
Looks like
Before we
John's got
wrap?
his little yellow
Yeah.
hand up.
There's John Racanelli. Yeah.
Kat, I'm looking very forward to reading the book. I just thought it was funny. I was on my way to an Ice Hogs game in Rockford a couple of weeks
Ah,
ago. I'm listening to the Hall of Very Good podcast, and
yeah.
you're talking about the book, and I'm
Yeah.
realizing I'm there like 2 days before the presentation at the Rockford Library. So
Oh
I'm sorry I missed
no.
that.
Yeah,
But
I'm
I,
sorry
I,
too.
I know that you've obviously known Maybelle a very long time. Was there anything in the book writing process, talking to her, a story you never heard before, anything that surprised you?
That's a good question. It wasn't so much that there was a story I hadn't heard, but some of the stories, she didn't really want to talk about. She'd kind of, over the years, I'd get the highlights of, oh, it's this, oh yeah, there was this time I did X. But then really, especially, and there, I don't want to give away a whole lot if you haven't read the book yet, but she tragically lost the love of her life. And I knew that, but I knew that, right? And so sitting and talking to her and getting that story and getting and I'm afraid I didn't do it justice in the book, the gut-wrenching way that she recalled it. And it just, because for those of you that either have met Maybelle or you've been around her, you've seen her on podcasts or interviews or whatever, she's kind of out there and fun and all kinds of there you go.
Oh my gosh, how
I mean,
cute.
she's just basically, she's just bubbly and happy. And so that's kind of who she is. And so to have a conversation that got into the sort of real feeling of that loss, even though I've known her almost 25 years, um, I had not experienced that. And so it made it even harder. And like I said, I knew that had happened, but I didn't know those details. So I think the same is true for most of the other stories. Like I knew she had been involved in a bar raid, but that's all I knew. And so it was kind of getting at the nuts and bolts of it that really was new to me.
And if I
And what
could
made it
just,
more gut wrenching is if especially for gay people who haven't come out, if they lose a loved one,
Yeah.
it's like they can't really,
Well, you
you
definitely
know,
couldn't in, yep,
yeah,
you definitely
yeah,
couldn't in 1970 or 71. And
yeah. Or
um
even if
and
anybody's read Billy Bean's
oh
biography,
yeah,
not
yeah,
the former player who became director of inclusion and
right,
diversity in MLB. Yeah,
right.
he lost his partner, and yeah, he had to
Yep,
pretend it as if it was just a friend, and
yep,
and they're just crushed, and
right.
it's I think that's
And that
very
was
sad.
certainly the generation, Maybelle is of a generation where she would have gotten arrested. I mean,
Exactly.
had she been caught in that bar, they would have all been arrested and she would have immediately been fired from her job.
Mhm.
And so, I'm not gonna get political, but those fears are returning. And so,
Mhm.
for her, that was her life. So for her to sit up on a stage at Tribeca Film Festival and say that, the courage that took is just, it's, it's just almost hard to explain.
can I ask a
Absolutely.
follow-up question? What's the best way to get the book that puts the most money in your pocket?
You can buy it directly from me.
Oh, okay.
And I will if anyone wants to, if someone would put my email address, kwilliams@iwbc.org. Just
I'll
email
put it in
me.
there.
Yep.
K
Just email
Williams, is
me.
there a dot in there?
No,
Okay.
kwilliams@iwbc.org. That's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
All right. Sure.
Yeah, just email me. I'm happy to do it. I have a limited number of books that are also signed by Maybelle. She lives in California, and so when we saw one another in Rockford, I asked her to sign some. So, um, but I don't have too many of them. But that's the best way. So thank you
Okay.
though for that.
kwilliams@iwbc.org.
That's it. That's
Okay.
it.
Fantastic. Yeah, some people
No.
don't like to go to Amazon, so.
Yeah,
Are
and
you
I
doing
get
any
that.
other in-person events?
Not right. Well, yes, I'm going to be at the Cooperstown Symposium at the end of May. We're working on a few others. I've done mostly a lot of podcasts and things like that. I did an event in Louisville, Kentucky. That's my hometown. So it was really kind of special to do that. So I am certainly open to them if anyone has any that they would like to suggest. So
Will you be
Bill,
at the Midway Museum in May? The Midway, I think they're having a World War II
oh, they're World War II
thing.
days.
Yeah,
I
are you
don't
going to
know
be involved in that at all?
I don't know when that is. The
May
IWBC.
24th, I think. Yeah, or that weekend.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Because I'll be in Cooperstown.
you'll be in
So
Cooperstown. Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
just wondering.
Bill, do you have your little yellow hand up? Thank you.
Yep.
I
How
do.
polite.
I
How
do.
polite of you.
Well, thank you. But I was going to ask it, and maybe you've answered this to a degree, but obviously in the mainstream, the 92 movie is how most people have learned about the league. And somebody like me who followed baseball, I couldn't believe that I was that age watching that movie and learning about it really for the first time.
Yeah.
And that's great because it gives a lot of exposure to the league and players. And again, they're in the film, they're composites.
Right.
When you write stories about genuine players who played in that league, what's
Mhm.
one of the biggest misconceptions you have to battle specifically because of the movie and its popularity?
Probably that that there was no softball. It's a double-edged sword, and this is a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing, but the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League started out as All-American Girls Softball League. And in that period in 1943, when the league was created, and up to that point, softball was enormously popular. And by the way, softball was never created for women and girls. It was created by men for men to play indoors in the winter during in Chicago. It was never for girls. It became an extremely popular sport. And so when Philip Wrigley and the other owners decided to create the league, they knew about the popularity of softball, certainly in the Midwest, and they knew that they were going to have to take recruit those young women to this league. So they played softball. And it was over a period of time that the ball got smaller, the base paths got longer. And so there's always this, yes, they played baseball, but not initially. And what that does is fuel that sort of back and forth baseball, softball, because we're in that now. I mean, I love softball. I played competitive fast pitch softball. It is a fantastic sport, but it is not baseball. And so there's this difficulty that's built in. So when you're writing these stories, when you're talking about these stories, I'm torn because I start to talk about it and somebody says, "Oh, you mean softball?" Girls play softball, they don't play baseball. And so I'm in this position then where I have to defend and say, no, 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 we have always played baseball and those women played baseball. But then I have to turn right around and say, but they did start with softball. So it's this weird sort of back and forth. And so that is one of the difficulties of telling that story because most people like a real stripped down, this is it, this is the way it was, this is how it is. And when it gets complicated and sort of fuzzy, it's difficult. And it's The movie was fairly accurate. The ball players themselves will say that it was about 90% accurate. There are two things that they were not happy with. One is that there would never have been a man in the locker room. And the other one was the portrayal of the chaperone. The chaperone in the movie was kind of goofy, and they did horrible things to her, and they loved the chaperones. I mean, they played tricks on them and stuff like that, but they loved them, and they were very much a part of the team. So it's that sort of, well, it's yeah, it's baseball, but it was also softball, and then so it's not an easy narrative, and so that's actually part of it.
Great, thank
But
you.
one thing is, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, one thing that's interesting about it is, back then in the 1940s, I think Wrigley or whoever was involved in setting up the All-American Girls, they really knew that they wanted to transition them to baseball. They knew that
Oh yeah,
pretty much
sure.
right away. They were going to try. In fact,
Yeah.
they started out with sort of baseball rules within softball, 12-inch
Yeah.
ball, and that there would be a better spectator sport. And we're still kind of dealing with that today. And that's why I don't like to just say softball, but I think girls who play really competitively, they'd be
Mhm.
better served playing baseball. And if you're going to have a professional league, I
Mhm.
think it's going to be baseball. It's just a better spectator sport. That's just my opinion.
And
But
that may certainly be true. The thing for me is it's about fairness.
mhm,
Everything I do
absolutely.
really comes down to that, right? If a girl wants to play baseball, why the hell shouldn't she get to play baseball? If she wants to play softball, great, go play softball. It's a great game.
Mhm.
But what is the deal? Why? I mean, I know historically what the deal is. There's not been a more androcentric game on the planet than baseball. But the thing is, it's like this doesn't make sense. And people say to me all the time, Kat, you spend your whole life talking about this stuff, and really, why does it matter? There's never going to be a woman in the major leagues. And I'm like, I don't care. Do you really think that our work is so unimportant that once one woman makes the major leagues, we're going to be like, oh, we made it, yay? We're far more important than that. And we have always been part of this game. And honestly, my thing is, if a woman's good enough, she darn well better get a chance to try. But my thing is, no, men are bigger, they're faster, they're stronger, they're going to hit the ball harder, they're going to throw the ball harder. We need our own league. We need to be able to play the game from the time we're 10 years old and up, and have our own league, have baseball, women's baseball in college. Why not? There's finally going to be baseball again in the Olympics. Will there be women's baseball? No. Why not? So that to me is the issue. It's about opportunity and access and fairness. And this moniker of baseball is America's game. It isn't. How can it be America's game if 50% of Americans can't play it? And so no one loves the game of baseball more than I do. I grew up, I was throwing a baseball when I should have been tripping over it. But it's that level of unfairness is part of the thing that keeps me moving. So, hey,
Good for you.
Bob.
Yeah, Bob, you've been
Yeah.
waiting so
Hey, hi,
patiently. Thank you.
Hi, Kat. Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, I grew up in Chicago, and of course, with Jack Brickhouse broadcasting Cubs games,
Yeah.
the years I probably became aware of the league, probably in high school though, and
Oh,
and
wow. Yeah.
and Wrigley seemed to be the center of it though. But
Yeah.
my question is though, who were some of the other owners that were involved? Because all I hear about is Wrigley involvement in it though. But those other
Yeah.
teams, were they owned by major league clubs and major league
No.
owners?
No, they were not. And that's I off the top of my head, I couldn't even tell you some of the names. They were more Midwestern minor league, and some of them were not team owners. They were businessmen. So and that is just I don't know those names. I'm sorry to say. Wrigley was the driving force. Now he only owned the league for a year. And then he sold it to Meyerhoff. So and then he kind of took it over, and he was more of a marketing guy, and really sort of started to market the teams.
Okay, yeah, because I wasn't quite sure what his exact role in it was, though. You
Yeah.
know, he owned all the teams or some of the teams, or
He owned the league. He owned the league. It was this group of owners owned the league, and then it was kind of like they didn't call it that, but it was kind of like selling a franchise, you know. So then people in Rockford would sponsor the teams, you know, Kenosha and Fort Wayne, and you know, and so initially it was that single owner model for the whole league.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Dennis, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say, before people have to start leaving, can we do the drawing
right.
for the
Yeah,
book?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. We're getting to 8:10, so we could keep talking afterwards if people want to stay on. But let's do the drawing. I just want to thank everyone for being here. We'll do the drawing, and then maybe we can announce future events with our different chapters if you'd like. And then anyone who wants to stay on, that's fine. So Kat, you have to pick a number between 1
and
and
18.
1 and
8.
18.
8.
Is that a player? Are you thinking of, or?
That was my number.
Okay.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Ed Edmonds.
Oh, wow.
All right. Ed.
Hey,
And
Yeah,
I don't have the book
congratulations.
yet,
Yeah.
so I would love to have it.
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
And
I
I have
actually
your
did have a question,
email
so
address.
we
So
can
yeah.
we can come back to that when it's convenient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ed, your email, your address, I imagine, out on the SABR profile is correct?
It is.
Okay.
Dennis, I have it too. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you do too. I think we've been in communication. So
Yeah.
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 So anybody have any events that they'd like to talk about? So our chapter, we're going to have our in-person meeting this Saturday on April 12th at J&B's on 52nd and Blue Mound here in Milwaukee. 11 o'clock in the morning. We'll have 2 speakers, lunch in the middle. I hope you can join us. Anybody from the other chapters, Bill or Ed or Bob?
Yeah, the Halsey Hall spring meeting is coming up at Faith Mennonite Church in Minneapolis on Saturday, April 19th. So knowing that it's the day before Easter, I suspect some of you won't want to make that particular trip. Dan Evans is going to be the principal speaker. We have 4 other presentations, which is kind of typical for the Halsey Hall meeting. And but I think it's been great. This is one of a number of joint meetings of you know, Midwestern chapters, and so it's I'm happy when we can do things with our neighbors.
Excellent.
Well, we do have
How about
3
you, Bill?
presentations.
Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
have 3. We have 3 presentations.
Plus Dan.
Dan is
Dan
an
Evans.
amazing human. So
Mhm.
yeah, if you can get there.
Yeah. I just want to make an announcement. Halsey Hall chapter and will be co-sponsoring along with Wisconsin chapter, I believe. Charlie Vassalero, and we will be
Oh.
setting a date in the future. And this is something I talked to Mary about
Mhm.
previously. We will be setting a date for his Zoom presentation. He will be talking about Rickwood Field and
Cool.
Willie Mays, an event that he attended. Charlie currently works for the Jackie Robinson Museum in New York City and the Jackie Robinson Foundation, though. So we will be setting a date shortly. It probably be in the first week of May, the way it looks right now, though. But stay tuned for that. Something you will want to see. He's got some great photos and great memorabilia that he'll be showing from last summer's event.
Okay, Bob,
Sounds fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
Our newsletter goes out May 4th-ish. It's generally right around the 4th of the month. So it'd be nice to have something in there, but if it's going to be, that date's going to be close to that date, getting something ahead of time so we could do a group email or something would be great also.
Yeah, okay, we can, yeah, I'll have to, I'm working on Charlie's availability right now here, though, so I'll keep that in mind. Thanks a lot. Thanks for mentioning that, Dennis.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Keep us updated, please. Bill, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was going
I
to
know you
say
had a meeting last night.
on May 17th, we're going to have a Chicago Zoom with Vanessa Ivey. We have a White Sox game on May 25th. More details on both of those to come. And randomly, if you're on Monday, April 21st down in Dwight, Illinois, I'm presenting on some small town baseball with a quirky political story. So
Cool.
You do great work with that. Yeah.
Oh,
fantastic.
thanks.
Yeah, yeah. And Vanessa Ivey is a great guest to have. Oh my gosh, she's so interesting. So
Yeah, details on that.
I'm going to be
still
there.
finalized, so we'll get that out as soon as we can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then Mary, there's some stuff coming up in Kenosha in June with the 80th reunion Emmy presentation and the Kingfish having the ball game.
Yeah, I'll make it. Yeah, we'll have stuff in the newsletter about it. So
Yeah.
it's through it's a couple of women who helped organize the Kenosha reunion, the 80th reunion a couple of years ago. So the Kingfish are going to honor the woman. I think they're going to be 3 players that make the game and are visiting Kenosha. So that game is at 6:30 on Friday, June 6th. And then the next day on the 7th at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon at the Pleasant Prairie Museum, they're going to dedicate a plaque for an Emmy win. So with the 80th reunion, they interviewed a lot of the players. It's a group called Uniquely Wisconsin, and they did a nice little 10-minute film. We have it. I think it's going to be in our newsletter. It was in our newsletter, right? Or it's going to be?
Yep. It was, and will probably be in there again in May as we're leading up to the June event, so people see
Yeah,
it.
a link to and it won an Emmy, a certain category. So they're giving the league a plaque, so they're going to dedicate that plaque. So it'll just be a nice gathering of the All-American girls. Yeah, so if you're interested in that, again, you can email me or check our newsletter or the events page. So we'll keep everyone updated. Anything else I'm missing, Dennis?
No.
Okay. Anything else? Or thank you so much for sharing Mabel with us. She is an inspiration. I love that she's like, I'll never retire from baseball. And that's what I feel like. Like we might not be playing, but we've lost a step, but we can
we'll
can't
never
retire.
No, you can't. It's not really possible. So thank you all so much for inviting me. This was wonderful and I really appreciate it. I love seeing all familiar faces and a bunch of new ones. So thanks again. And Mary, thank you for making this happen.
Oh, thank you for your time and for everybody's time. It was, I hope you enjoyed it, and it was wonderful.
I did.
To hear your stories. Yeah.
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye.